Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Father Talks podcast. I am your host, Mike D, and I'm joined by Mr. John Little. John is the founder of the Leader in the Mirror project. John, welcome to the show. Let's talk. I'm excited to have you, man. Listen, I was reading through your profile and that, and man, listen, you've been a pretty busy guy over the last few years. You know, just a few. But
Yeah.
like what people don't realize, man, is that, hey, it takes a lot to start these organizations and whatnot. I've been doing some research and I saw, everything that goes into it,
hmm
and I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but, I really want to talk about this, and then I'll work backwards a little bit, after you get through telling us about the Leader in the Mirror project.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I really
Yeah.
appreciate this opportunity. And,
Thank you.
speaking to men and speaking to fathers specifically is, certainly one of my passions and focuses. And it really is the impetus behind the Leader in the Mirror project. And I know we'll talk a lot more deeply
Yes.
into it. But it really is, I want to continue to create spaces for men to learn, to grow, to develop, to support their families and to show up for their families and the people in their lives as the best versions of themselves. And so that's really the backbone of everything. And again, we'll talk a lot more as we
For sure.
continue through this
Absolutely.
conversation.
All right. So what is the project about?
So the project is really about and for accomplished men who are kind of in that, I like to call it like that third quarter of life. So, you're
Okay.
in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and, you have been successful doing things a certain way up to this point in your life. And a lot of times men at this age, we go through what I call dynamic life changes. And those dynamic life changes can be, maybe it's a change in your career. Maybe have gotten to a point in your career where you've plateaued, or maybe you're transitioning to a new role, or maybe you have been with a company for a while and you're, changing to a new company, or a position got
Gotcha.
eliminated. Like all of those, kind of in that career space. Or maybe the dynamic life change is a change in a relationship. Relationships change. We know that, relationships end. We know that, so maybe that's something that men are navigating through, or different stages of fatherhood. Myself, I started late, so yeah, I have an 11-year-old son, and my son is on the autism spectrum, so that has unique challenges. And I'm a single dad with primary responsibility and custody, so that comes with unique challenges. And the things that I have done throughout my life to be successful, I can't just apply those. I can't just copy paste those into my
Right.
role as a father. But different fathers may be dealing with things like, maybe they're a stepdad, maybe they're an empty nester, especially at this age now, 40s, 50s, 60s.
Right.
If you're an empty nester, a lot of things as it relates to the roles that you have played in the lives of your family have changed. And men don't always adjust to those changes well, because again, they try to copy paste what they've been doing, what's been successful, what's helped them kind of reach where they are, and it doesn't quite fit. And sometimes we struggle internally, like, why isn't this working? Or I feel lost or disoriented, or I feel, like maybe people don't get me, or maybe I don't get myself. All of those things are really kind of what drove this project together, is creating a space for those men who are navigating through those different roles, those different areas of their life, to find community, and also to find different things that they can start to do, start to approach, start to look at differently. I lean a lot into my background with, coaching executives and
Okay.
executive coaching and leadership development. So a lot of it starts with awareness and kind of building from there. So that's I gave you the full brochure in the first answer,
No, it's
but
excellent.
it's
Excellent.
there's many pages to that brochure.
Right. All right. So, you mentioned, I was looking, like I said, I was trying to really look through your profile and things, and a lot of things that you mentioned, and it brought me to, can a man be successful, right, and still feel just extremely lost in the world?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because success has so many different dynamics and so many different ways that it shows, that you can be, and I'm sure that I know, and Mike, I'm sure you probably know people who are extremely successful at work, extremely
Yes.
successful on paper, And as soon as they get in their car driving home, they're completely lost because they feel like a stranger in their own home,
Right.
or they feel like that they don't know how to have the same type of conversations with their teenagers or with their partner, their spouse,
Right.
that they may have at work. So they can fix problems at work all day long, but then when they get home, they beat themselves up because why can't I solve this one thing in my home? So yeah, men can be successful and also struggle. We see it all the time because, and the other thing is there's so many different definitions of success. And if we're trying to measure all of our success by the same standard, then we're always going to end up losing because success has so many different facets, so many different ways that it looks, so many different ways that we interpret it as men, so many different ways that society interprets it. But that's where kind of getting a sense of where you are and where you want to be is so important, because then you can start to define what success looks like for yourself.
Understand. Um, so let me follow it up with men. As we know, we despise anything emotional too, especially emotionally, that makes us seem weak. You know, how can you know? In my we can use either one of us, but with our success, how can we admit, that we're feeling, stress, feeling loss and whatnot, but it's simultaneously not feeling that we're weak because we feel that way.
That's a big part of why community is huge in this space. A lot
Okay.
of times we feel weak because we feel alone. We feel like I feel like I'm failing because I see everybody else succeeding. So that makes me
Mm,
feel weak or vulnerable. When again, the reality is everybody that we see is struggling with something. As
okay.
men of a certain age, and I don't know exactly how old you are. You have some wisdom down here, like I have some wisdom
Yeah,
down
yeah.
here.
I like to
Uh,
call it wisdom. My
yes,
son tells me, you're getting old.
we were raised at a time where men did not show, demonstrate, appreciate emotion the same way that we do today. So we were taught to suck it up. We were taught to fight through. We were taught to not show, right? I often joke that as you know, Gen X, I'm 56, or be 56 later this year. As Gen X, we grew up, playing on broken glass and drinking hose water. So, like that's kind of within us. So it's not natural for us to be vulnerable. It's not natural for us to show what could be perceived as weakness, but is in reality, it's just you being as a human. And that's what those emotions are. When we can when we can recognize those emotions and we can not be ashamed or afraid to show them, then we can start to work through them. But that fear typically comes from, or that feeling of weakness typically comes from, we're just not equipped. We haven't been doing it our whole lives. We don't have the tools to push through or to navigate around or to grow from some of the things that we really struggle with. We do it so well in other areas of our lives. We do it so well. We all know or seen or have experienced, professionally, where you started as an hourly employee and all of a sudden you're in the C-suite, or you
Sure.
may have grown up with, with nothing on the table, but you worked so hard in your life to make sure that your family didn't have that same experience. And so we've seen those successes. But when it comes to the internal struggles, we just struggle to find the tools and the resources, and sometimes the awareness and the courage to know I can solve this, but I probably can't solve it alone because um, I don't have the practice, I don't have the reps in doing it.
Right. Yeah, and it's crazy because you mentioned the hose water, and I try to tell my kids all the time, man, it's crazy to me how different we are because, like, and some people may be offended by this, but so growing up, my mom, me and my brother would go to the grocery store with my mom. You know, she's like, "You guys sit here. I'm gonna do groceries. You guys relax for a second. I'm gonna get the food. Be back." Okay. Me and my brother never suffered a single heat stroke or anything. Why? Because we knew to get the hell out of the car. It was hot, and one of us would watch, hey, mama's coming, and we'd jump back in the car. or, when we were outdoors playing this, that, and the third, you know what? Hey,
Hmm.
my dad's rules are like, if you keep coming back in this house, you in for the rest of the day.
You're
So,
in or you're out.
yeah. And so that was where the hose water came in. It was like, hey, I'm thirsty, but I'm not thirsty enough to go back in the house, you know? So, and,
Yes.
but my parents, they're wonderful people, you know,
Hmm.
those were their rules and things growing up. But I think for me, one of the things that was missing is connection, is that, that everyday hug, I love you, those things. My parents were phenomenal providers. So again, I always try to make sure I insert that because people think, oh, he grew up with this terrible life. No, I didn't actually. My parents were just, they were providers. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, but that is something I try to shape myself to not just be. And not
Hmm.
all of us have learned, what, to be able to talk to our kids, have to have conversations even, you know, just, and that was a process, and thank God for my wife because me and my kids would have never had a conversation. It would have been like, hey, you do what I said, and that's the end of it. But as young adults now, because I've had somebody who could kind of help me along the way, I guess, you know, I was able to talk to my kids. I was able to, articulate certain things. And again, I'm 52, but there are still so many things that I could not do, express myself emotionally, when I was worried about my son or my daughter, I couldn't do any of those things, and there wasn't a community, like you had mentioned, where men could talk. There
Hmm.
wasn't a group of, men sharing the same situation, the same issues, the same things going, the same struggles, period. You know, so that's why, like, what you're doing, I think, people, we need this in this day and age so much because I look, I look at the outside world and I am very fearful for my son, for all my boys,
Hmm.
because the world's not kind to us. And if you're a man who is unable to articulate what he needs, you know,
Hmm.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and I mean, and let me point out too, hey, kudos to you, single dad, you probably won't get the appreciation, and we'll just say others would, for being a
Hmm.
single parent.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So
Appreciate that.
I see you, and I want you to know, hey, hats off to you because it is not something that everybody is capable of doing. But when they are, hey, we need to applaud that because guess what? Not everybody gets the opportunity. Not everybody wants the opportunity, you know? So, uh, again, hey, if
Thank
I had
you.
an applause button, we weren't just something, if we had an audience, people could, genuinely clap for you. But again, I just wanted to just sidebar that real quick and just, hey, thank you for doing what you're doing for your boy, because, and again, just appreciate it because not everybody's doing it. Not everybody can, not everybody will. So,
No, I
uh,
thank you for
I'm
that.
sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you for that. It really, it's I often describe it as the hardest, best job that I'll ever have.
Right.
Um, but it has really caused me to grow so much in that role. And again, this is all part of why I am so passionate about this Leader in the Mirror project, because there were some really key moments in my journey as a father and my journey in becoming a single father. And as that responsibility grew and evolved, um, I couldn't just do what I had always been doing.
Right.
And I had to lean, and fortunately, because this is what I've done for 20 years, I had the tools around emotional intelligence and around EQ and around self-awareness, and
Okay.
but I still struggled a lot. And it was a smaller community that I had that let me know I needed to build a bigger community. One of my best friends from college,
Mm,
his son is 3 years older than my son. His
okay.
son is also on the autism spectrum. And
Really?
so there have been so many times where I did not have the answer. And I just had to call him and be like, he's one of my fraternity brothers as well. And I'd be like, frat, like, what do I do? And his answer is almost be a dad. That's always almost his answer is be a dad, because there's no playbook. There's no rule book. There's no one size fits all guide. But being a father is something that you don't have to think twice around. You don't have to have rules around. Like, what does the biggest pivot for me with my son was, how do I get out of trying to fit him into my world? And how do I find space in his world? That
Okay.
shift was
Wow.
massive. That
Yes.
was a game changer.
Yeah. Holy. I know. You know what? And I know you said your boy's on the spectrum, but looking at it from that point of view, man, that is, you know, for me, like I've seen, I've talked to people. I had another guest on whose daughter was on the spectrum and that, and I just never really considered. We're always trying to make everything right for us, but we're not taking a step into, their world, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's probably the better way.
Yeah. And that lesson applies to so many different areas in our lives as well. So many different relationships in our lives. There's 7 archetypes that I talk about when it
Okay.
comes to men in this space, and they're roles that we have played in our lives, and we found success in them, and that's why we lean into them. And it's being a fixer, or being a provider, or being a protector, or being a performer, being a controller, being a calculator, and being a drifter. And it's like, so those 7 archetypes that we have, it really is kind of our internal compass on how we have found success and comfort through life. And
Mm,
we will lean into those as men and as fathers. And, I'll use that provider example that you were talking about, right? That was kind of one of your big focuses was,
yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm providing everything. I want to provide, provide, provide. Many times men see the provision lens through a transactional approach. I'm going to make sure there's food on the table. I'm going to make sure there's a roof over our head. Going to make sure that we have everything that we need. We're able to enjoy life as a family, right? And that's a big part of being a provider. Sometimes that shifts, right? And Mike, how old are your children?
Well, my oldest is 34.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. 33, about to be 34.
Okay.
My youngest is 17. She just turned 17 in June. Getting ready
Okay.
to graduate this year, and I don't know what I'm gonna do when there's nobody in the damn house.
There you go. And
Well,
that we
so
landed exactly where I was taking you,
yeah,
because that provider role, and you said it with your oldest, at some point, hopefully, knock on wood, at some point, the provision that your oldest needed from you was not financial provision. They didn't need you to put food on their table. They didn't need you to put a roof over their head. They didn't need you to plan out their summer vacations. But that didn't mean that they didn't need you anymore.
right,
How you needed to provide changed. And as your youngest is 17, you're about to hit that stage of being an empty nester, to where the way that you provide is going to change. And you said it, like, when the house is empty, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. There's a lot of men that have that same experience, but they don't
yeah,
articulate it.
yeah. eh, Go ahead.
No, when they don't articulate it, it starts to sit, and it starts to kind of fester and grow, and that can start to derail their sense of identity, can derail their sense of value, can derail their sense of, like, so now what? And there are different ways that we can lean into being a provider that don't have the same type of transactional elements, because the needs of other people around us change. So how do we still show up as the best version of ourselves in those moments that matter, when our lens is through being a provider, or being a fixer, or being a controller? Like, how do we still show up as the best version of ourselves? And often that exact, like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do.
Right.
That can be the stop sign for a lot of men, and they get stuck there for years. And the world starts to see that they're, maybe acting and showing up differently, because internally the turmoil is just constantly flowing.
Right. I know that as my kids have gotten older, I have become more of an advisor.
Hmm.
They'll come to me with certain things, and look for my insight, you know. And I think one thing has always been, at least for me, I don't know how other men deal with this, is understanding that your kids have reached a point in their lives where they come to you for advice, and what you say is just that. It's advice,
Hmm.
and we have to accept
Yeah.
that, you know, uh, just because we gave it to you doesn't mean you're going to use it. Okay. It doesn't mean you're going to take what we said and just consume it all. And like, num, 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 num. You know what? This is what my dad said. It's gotta be gold. You know, I think
Yeah.
for me, always telling my kids, okay, just because I'm giving you advice doesn't mean that this is the way. You
Hmm.
know, you have to find out what works best for you. We've always been big advocates on, pushing getting our kids to advocate for themselves. So as they become adults, you know, it's been, it's not really a major transition for us for them to only, call us for advice on things. So
Yeah.
I'm not heartbroken that my kids, don't call me every day for stuff and whatnot. Hey, when they
Right.
go a little bit and don't call me, you know what? I feel like, hey, this means everything is okay. When they
Yeah.
call me every day, you know what? Like, hey, somebody to mismanage some stuff. You know? Um, but all right, so let's move on a little bit. When does providing, become a form of hiding for us? Because we've been talking going back and forth about this, but we're we're so consumed with doing things for our family, making sure they have things, this that. When does that become again a form of hiding from other things, from acknowledging that we're having struggles, so on and so forth.
What I've seen is it becomes a form of hiding when we don't see another way for us to show up in uh where we're giving value, right?
Okay. Okay.
A lot of times providing, it's hardwired within us in a certain, in a certain form, but it also is the way that in our minds we check that box of well done, right? When we pay the mortgage, well done, right? Food on the table, well done. When we can no longer check those boxes in our mind, then we start to create boxes to check. And that's our
Right.
way of hiding. Right. So we're scoring off of a different scorecard.
Okay.
And those people that maybe we're scoring for, maybe their scorecard is different. So, but in our minds, we still think like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm, 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 I'm being who I need to be right now.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes we don't know if that's who we need to be because we haven't asked the questions of the people around us. Like, how do you need me? How do you need me right now? What do you need me to, not necessarily what do you need me to do for you, but what role can I best serve you in? And
Hmm.
that's also a key word when you hear people hiding. And this is something that I gave you those 7 archetypes, that the one that I call the performer will often hide behind pleasing rather than serving. So like giving those in your life or those people who are important to you, like giving them everything,
Hmm.
um, giving them what they need, even if we know that this isn't really what they need. That's what they want. And that's what's going to appease them. But like, I would be better off not giving them that, but I want to make sure that I'm still appearing in the same light that I always did. So like, I'm hiding behind what I'm putting out there, but I know that I should be doing something different. That's a form of hiding. And when does it happen? It happens as those dynamic changes happen in life, as the roles that we have typically found success in, they start to be less important to others.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's where our lens has to shift. That's where where our view has to shift, and we have to be able to adjust.
Right. See, and I've learned a lot in my life that we often suffer in silence.
Hmm.
Because hey, I'm your dad, and I can't have you see me this way. You know, and I just again, through podcasting and, talking to different people, I've learned all these different perspectives, and I try to keep reiterating this so as often as possible that, I have hid, my own struggles for so long that now that I am, I am learning, you know, even at 52 years old, I am learning now, what, that I don't have to be silent. I don't have to suffer. You know,
Hmm.
I can, the things that I thought I was protecting my kids from, you know, is actually probably been the the gorge that's been keeping us apart, you know, because for me, I didn't want them to see me sad. I didn't want them to see, my kids will tell you they've never seen me cry. You know, I I don't drink excessively. When I do drink, it's a sit back and relax drink. I've never just been out of dad mode. You
Hmm.
know,
Yep.
I've always been dad this, trying to be the responsible one, trying to do this, trying to do that. And this entire time I had up until honestly, as God is my witness, up until about 9 months ago when I started doing this, I had always kept everything inside, you know, and now that I don't have to, it is I had to tell you, man, I'm feeling pretty unburdened lately. you know.
Hmm.
So and I hope that, uh, through these conversations that more men, can get into that space, you know, have conversations, with people like yourself, John, because, we desperately need more community, more, I mean, somebody to go fishing with,
Yeah.
somebody to just sit and talk with, I'm a pretty outdoorsy person, like I love the gun range, I just like to go shoot casually and whatnot. And or I go to the gym, just anything outside of just sitting in the house in silence or, you know, working in the backyard, you know, yeah, I have been again very unburdened in the last 5 months. And this is why I'm so eager to try to share these things, because I don't have to perform anymore. And I
Yeah.
probably should have never been performing, but it was all I knew, you know.
Absolutely.
And my stepfather, phenomenal dude, man. I tell you, I just I was able to be there for me. He just buried his brother a couple days ago, and to see. So my dad's from a fairly large family, but I saw something in my dad that I've never seen before, and it was just genuine pride and happiness at a funeral.
Mm.
Okay, because
Yeah.
his younger brother was doing part of the service, you know, and he was just watching them and listening. And man, I have never seen this man smile this way. Okay. And
Yeah.
this is not I played a joke on you smile. This was the absolute, the most joy I had ever seen on this man's face ever.
That's the word.
You know,
Hmm.
that's that's the type of unburdening I want to feel in my life. I want my kids to be able to see me smile that way, whether and hopefully it's not at a funeral,
Right.
but I want my kids to be able to see that joy in me. Now
Hmm.
when I tell him or when he hears this episode, he was like, "That's not why I was smiling. I was thinking about, oh, I was thinking about, this time where I was messing with one of y'all. That's what I was laughing at." He'll never admit, but I know better. I know
Right.
better. You know,
Right.
so, um, yeah, man, it's crazy. Uh, and I know I got a little bit off track and whatnot. Um, but so are some men addicted to being needed? That would be, I feel I feel like I already know the answer to this, but I want to ask you. So by asking the question, everybody hears it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is something that it's been conditioned in us a lot of times.
Yes.
And a lot of times our background and our upbringing will contribute to that at different levels.
Okay.
But there are absolutely men who are addicted to being needed, or men who are addicted um to being the one who solves everything, being the
Yes.
one who provides the answer for everything, being the go-to person for everything. That is something that men struggle with a lot more than they would tell you.
Yes.
because again, this is part conditioning. This is part just how, a lot of us have found ways for us to be successful and valued. I'll keep coming back to that word of value. We have found that the better that we perform in that role, we equate it at some level to love. We equate it at some level to status. We equate it at some level to respect.
Hmm.
And that is something that on a human level, we all chase, whether we admit it or not. And so that's where that tie comes in. When you were talking about your stepdad, and you were talking about you as a dad, something popped into my mind that I've carried over from the work that I've done in professional and corporate spaces and working with leaders and executives. I will say this so many times to just drill it into their head. People connect with people, not positions, right? And so part of our position can be a father, can be a dad, can be a husband, can be an uncle, can be a title that we are assigned by the role that we play in our life. When we lean so far into the title and the job description that we interpret based on that title, then we do get those moments of disconnect to where, like you were saying, like when you want your kids to come to you and not in dad mode, you want your kids to come to, even though they wouldn't call you Mike, you want your
Yeah.
kids to come to Mike, right?
Yeah.
You want
Facts.
your kids to come to you like your boy would, you want your kids to come to you like, your childhood friend would. Like that's the goal,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's the person and that's who they want to connect with. For so many of us, in our generation, that, those 40s, 50s, 60s, for so many of us, dad just stayed dad. They just stayed that job title in that job role for the entirety of time that we knew them. Right. I was fortunate enough where, that shift did happen with my father and I, where, he became more of a friend than the title of dad. Right. My expectations changed, the way that he, the way that he led me changed, but he never was not dad. He was never not my father. Right. So, but men struggle with that sometimes. It's like, if I go too far one direction, then do I still have the same status, the same respect, the same job description that I've been getting pretty good reviews every year because I get the phone calls, right? I get the happy birthday. I get the hugs when they come, but so it's been working. So let me just keep doing this. And when the expectations change and the needs change, some men struggle to change along with them. And that's where we can sometimes see a bit of a disconnect between people wanting to connect with the person and wanting to get more into the person, and the person behind the title of dad is able to meet them halfway and recalibrate how they're showing up and how they're engaging with the people in their lives. So it is, it's something that again, that having awareness of it is huge, and being able to make that shift and still feel comfortable with, I'm still valuable. I'm still like, I can now change how I see love and how I show love and how I see how I'm valued in someone's life. And I see the respect continue to be there. When we see that, when we start to see it in practice, we're like, okay, like now I get it. Now I can serve both roles. I can take one hat off and put another hat on, or
Yes.
wear a hat and a
Yes.
shirt that say similar things.
Yeah. And listen, I have been telling my kids for so long, and excuse my language. Actually, I don't excuse my language because we're both adults.
Mm-hmm.
I have been telling my kids for years, I am not your fucking friend.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's been a long time since, I could just take that hat of structure off,
Yeah.
hey, I am this guy and these are my responsibilities. I cannot shirk my duties as a father, and we can't be friends right now. There will be a time and place where, I can take this hat off, I hope, and just be able to be, the person that you can lean on, the person you can just vent to, and not solely, you know what, have my dad hat on. I want,
Mm-hmm.
my boys are a little bit older now. my my middle boy has a son,
Mhm.
and we get to sit down and occasionally have beers together and just talk.
Yeah.
I get to hear about his day as a father.
Hmm.
And listen, that is exciting to me, man. I love it. And
Yeah.
that's what I want for more men, is to get that feeling where when their adult children reach that certain stage in their life where they
Hmm.
can come home and be like, "Hey, Dad, I got to tell you something."
Right.
Hey, Dad, Dad, let me buy you a beer and we
There
can
you go.
sit down and have a conversation. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
those are the things that I am looking forward to now as my kids are getting older and they're moved out. Again, it's it's amazing. It's amazing to see. And like I said, sitting down with my son and just shooting the shit like I would anybody else, like me and you,
Yeah.
hanging out, sitting at the bar, having a conversation about work or complaining about whatever have you. You know what?
Yeah.
I can now sit with, my middle boy and talk to him about, what dad life is like for him. You
Yeah.
know, my other son has a friend, he had a kid just after high school, and,
Hmm.
he actually stops by on a regular basis, like, "Hey, Mr. Darden, hey, what's going on?" I'm like, "Okay, first off, stop calling me mister." You know, okay,
Right.
I appreciate the respect, and I play that back in my head too because, my in-laws used to hate that, you know,
Uh,
but, uh, that's my father's name, or "Yes, sir." I work for a living, but,
uh-huh.
it's just been a great feeling, and I wanna continue. I have a lot of improving to do yet. I have a lot of improving to do, and I am fully aware of that. But again, like I said, through conversations like this, through people like you know, my personal struggles are getting better. They're not
Hmm.
they're not finished, but they are
Right.
getting better, you know. So again, I just want, I want to thank you, for having these conversations. I'm thanking you for, starting, you know, for doing everything that you're doing. And I know you, in your mind, you may say, well, that's my son. It's my job to take care of him. There's a lot of people out there who, who shirk that duty, you know. So, hey, kudos to you, but moving on, how do we bring more people under the tent? How do we bring more people into the circle?
Um, I think by showing
Okay.
the way.
Okay.
Um, I love that you shared that your journey so far, and you also recognize that you have a ways to go. That's why I
Oh,
call this
absolutely.
this stage our third quarter in life,
Okay.
because God willing, you got another 30 years ahead of you,
God, I hope so.
right?
I mean, I keep telling myself I'm never going to die. They're just going to replace parts, you know, but I'm never going to, so
Right. So think about if you think back over your past 30 years, which would have
okay.
made you what, 22,
Yep.
and your next 30 years, how many things can you, if you try to replicate how you learned, how you grew, the things that you did, if you try to replicate the past 30 years into the next 30 years, how would that work out for you?
Never,
Right.
never. I am a complete listen. Whew,
Uh-huh.
30 years ago, I was not willing to listen to anything. Okay.
Hmm.
It was going to be the way that I was going to do it. And that's that. Okay. And now that I realize that my way doesn't always work. After we're done, I'm going to mute that part out and try to replace it with something else because everybody in my family is going to run with that one. So,
Well, here's the reason why I asked that question in response to your question, is how do we get more people under the tent? And I said, by
yes, sir.
showing the people who are the most lost are the people who are trying to do in the next 30 years what they did in the past 30 years to get to where they are today. And
Whew.
so when the people in your circle and in your life see how you are continuing to grow, how you are continuing to adapt, how the people in your circle are responding to you and how you've grown, and the different ways that you're showing up in those roles and in your life and in their lives,
Mhm.
they're going to say, what's Mike doing? Like how I'm feeling, I'm sitting in the driveway because I don't want to go in the house. I'm spending, I'm spending an extra hour and a half at the office, and I got no work to do. But Mike's happy to go home. But Mike's happy to be spending time with his people on the weekend. And the dynamic is different, and the conversations are different, and things are things that are important to Mike now weren't important to him 10 years ago. Like, what's he doing? That's how we get more people,
Right.
because again, here's the reality of it. They're not going to ask you. They're not going to ask, Mike, what are you doing differently? Because I noticed that things are different. I noticed that, I see that you've changed. I see that I hear the things that you're talking about are different than things you were talking about. What are you doing differently? Men don't do that.
Yeah.
Men
Why
sit
is
back
that?
and observe.
Why is that though? Why are we so afraid to ask each other?
Because it going back to one of your questions earlier, we can interpret that as weakness. We can interpret that as vulnerability.
True. Okay.
If you're doing something that I don't know how to do, I have to admit to it myself that I don't know as much as you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are wired to then do what? Figure it out.
Yes.
Because what have we done for the past 30 years?
Figure it out.
Figured it out, right? There was a team that I was on at an organization a few years ago, and our team motto was FTSO. Figure that shit out. That was what whenever we got stuck on something, we would just say, all right, FTSO, right? And that has its applications, but it doesn't always, that's not always the answer. So that's why that's how we get more people in the tent is one, by sharing proactively what we're doing. A lot of times it's just the different approaches that we're taking. So it's not necessarily something that we're doing. It's just how we're thinking about it. It's just how we're asking, more questions. And so that's one big way. And then continue to amplify the work, that we see working, right? And being willing to share that. And again, that's the reason why community is so important. The perception and the reality between men and women is different. So the perception and kind of the stereotype is the old single woman with 34 cats in the house, right? That's like the perception. That's a stereotype. The reality is that more men die alone than women, because women find ways to have community. Think about it. Book clubs, church socials, lunch groups, tea parties, whatever it is. Women find ways to connect with other women around common interests. Men, we typically will do it around a couple of few things. If we're sports fans, we tend to find other people who share the same sports interest. If we play something like golf or pickleball, we'll find people who have that same interest. If we're in a fraternity, we may lean into that, or in a church group, right? Those or for maybe a veteran, we may gravitate towards it. Like, so our groups are typically, men's groups are typically centered around something, not necessarily around community. Like, when was the last time that you called your 3 closest friends and said, hey guys, I just want to sit down and talk?
Yeah.
Like, how would that go?
That would have been sometime next to never.
Right.
Never.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
hey man, listen, I was just wondering what you were doing. I want to, I just called because I want to talk about my feelings. I would get hung up on. And I say that because my friends would instantly assume that there's a joke coming.
Right. Right.
So even though I could be sincere, my friends would think like, all right, bro, just get to the joke part, because I know this ain't serious.
I'm too busy for this.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly
so let's flip it. Now, when was the last time that maybe, your wife, your sister, another woman in your life just went to dinner with her girls? Just to talk. Right?
Woo! About a month ago. And the girls got together, went to breakfast and whatnot, and they just sit around and, shoot the shit about everything.
Yep. So, that's what we don't do.
Yeah.
unless it's around something, a team, a game, a sport, a common experience that we've had. So that's why community is so important,
Right.
because until we start to pull more men in and we start to have these conversations, because here's what I've found, which has been fascinating. Men are not afraid of having conversations like we're having. Men are not afraid to be vulnerable. They're just generally afraid to lead with that in a space where it's not already expected.
Gotcha.
When you have a space that it's already expected, men are going to talk about human things, because that's what we are. We're humans. We're just looking for the places to be able to have those conversations where I don't have to worry about being judged. I don't have to worry about you thinking that I'm weak, or that I'm soft, or that I can't handle things, right? I don't have to worry about that, because we've established that we're in a space where those are the things that we're going to work on together, because the goal is to still be that strong, that positive, that model of what we want the perception of the world of us to be, the people in our lives. We want to still be on that pedestal. But we can't get there alone a lot of times. But we're also just not going to call our boys and say, hey, let's go to the bar and talk about what I'm struggling with this week.
Yeah.
That's simply not going to happen.
I am, as you're saying this, I'm trying to picture this, saying this to my friends. And I'm telling you, most of the time they're gonna be like, I don't know what's going on, but please stop playing with me, because the wife has got me doing some other stuff, and you play too much, and it's sad, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So,
but your friends probably have things that they would absolutely love to talk about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had an interview with a guy, and he said he was friends with a guy for, I want to say they went to high school together. They were in college together for a while, and they've known each other basically the bulk of their lives. Now, they had both been married, and I guess the friend was getting divorced, and him and his wife had been having struggles for like 10 years. He never knew it.
Yeah.
He said, I go out with this guy. We go golf once or twice a week. We have been, for the last 10, 15 years. And he comes and tells me he's getting a divorce. I'm like, well, have you guys tried counseling? He was like, yeah, a couple of years ago. He didn't even know that they were in counseling or having any racial relationship issues.
Yeah.
And you've known this guy over half your life, and he did not feel you were a safe space to share that with. That's a problem.
Right. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's one of the dynamics that I talk about is we want to have those golf cart conversations. And I literally use that phrasing is we want to have those golf cart conversations where like we're between holes, and like, I know this is a safe space, and I could say, Mike, like it's rough at home right now.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what you want to say, but the space needs to be there to do it. And a lot of times if I feel comfortable, like I'm going to have that conversation on the golf cart with you.
Right.
Right.
Well, I know that I joined the men's group. Last week was the first week I had gone, and every last man there always felt like it was just them.
Yep.
Like, so no matter what the struggle is, okay, every last one of them admitted that they felt like, well, I thought it was just me going through this, so I didn't say nothing because I assumed it was just me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
that's that isolation that we unfortunately find ourselves in often as men, is thinking that we're the only ones going through it. And so I got to figure it out for myself, because nobody else is going to have the answer, because no one understands it.
Right. And I was shocked, man, because when guys started admitting to it, I was like, okay, so I'm not sitting here in this very moment thinking the exact same thing. Everybody is thinking like, hey, I can relate to this story. I can relate to that story. It's not just me. It's all of us. We just don't know how to talk about it.
Right. That's it. And that's part of again, why this project is something that I started and is so important to me, is to start to equip men with the tools to talk about it. to talk about it with each other and to talk about it with the people that are important in their lives.
Okay. So before we close, what's one piece of advice? Let's give us two pieces of advice for any man right now, any man who wants to find community and does not want to continue stuck in this cycle.
So the two pieces of advice that I would give to that man is recognize that you're not alone.
Okay.
And recognize that it's okay if you don't have those answers. Like, give yourself permission to be vulnerable. Give yourself permission to get into the space of being a learner of yourself,
Okay.
of life, of where you are. Like, giving yourself permission to say, I do need community. I do need support. I do need some coaching. I do need some guidance. And that's okay.
Okay.
Like, that's the first piece of advice that I would give someone, because that's the biggest hurdle. That's the biggest obstacle. The other piece of advice that I would give someone is to recognize that you could be at a life reset point. We tend to look at life as a continuum, and that everything needs to build on top of what we've already done.
Gotcha. Okay.
When we get to a certain point in life, the continuum disconnects a little bit. There are certain things that will continue to carry over, but recognize that, like, resetting at a certain point in life doesn't equate to failure. Recognizing that you need to do things differently, that's actually a huge win. It's a massive win, because that's where your growth is going to just explode. Because once you can, when you're trying to carry everything forward that you've been carrying for a long time, it makes it harder to get those big leaps, to make those big kind of life changes. When you recognize, hey, this reset is a good thing, then you're able to kind of look at the next stages and look at the next things. Like, I can go sprint towards that rather than feel like I have to drag everything forward. And I'll just kind of tie that in real quickly to one of the other archetypes that I talked about, which is the drifter. And when I talk about the drifter, like, the example that I use is, think about somebody who was in a career role for a long time, and they built their way through their career, and, they had grown and gone up the corporate ladder, and they always associated their identity with their title. Which a lot of men do, right? Most men, when they introduce themselves, they say, hey, my name is John. What do you do? That's always the question, right? So, like, that is part of our identity. The drifter finds himself in a space where, and in this example, this person who had built their career up, got to a point where they, took a severance package. And it was a healthy severance package, and they were good, right? Like, they weren't now struggling to figure out, how am I going to survive and provide, because they had already had everything that they'd done, but now they don't have the identity to tie to. So they start to drift. They start to drift from one thing to the other, and they can seem like they don't have motivation, or they can seem like they don't have purpose, when really what they're lacking is a direction to point towards. And so they end up just kind of drifting through. And so that's one of those key moments for men a lot of times is, how do I stop drifting? How do I get back connected to something? It starts with recognizing that that's where you are. And instead of trying to carry forward all the things that were, what your identity was built off of, which was your title and your job role, now your identity is you as a man. What's important to you now, right? What's the new direction that you want to go? And in that new direction, if you're trying to pull all these things forward, it's going to be a lot harder to move in that direction. But when you're able to say, that's the direction that I want to go, and you see that as a new opportunity, you see that as a reset, you see that as a new starting point instead of a continuation, then that really opens up and frees up your mind, your spirit, your ability to grow in those spaces. So probably a much longer answer than you asked for.
Hey,
but
listen, that is all right. That is all right. So before we close, John, where can people get in contact with you at?
Yeah. So thank you for that. So the best place for people to go is mirror.bigjohnlittle.com. And what that does is that takes people to an assessment. kind of a self check. And through that assessment, it will give you a sense of kind of where you are in those 7 archetypes that I mentioned. So, how you were most closely aligned to one of those. And from there, share with you a cheat sheet so you can get a little bit more insight into that archetype. And also kind of a quick workbook. So that way you can start to see, oh, this is what this means. This is how I'm thinking about things. And this is how I could think about it maybe a little bit differently. So there's a few opportunities to learn more about yourself. I'm right now building the waiting list for the next cohorts of the Leader in the Mirror project. So I bring together, and anywhere between 6 to 12 guys. We go through a 4-week group coaching and community program with then, opportunities to join the broader community that we're building. But yeah, mirror.bigjohnlittle.com is the first place to start. And, again, this is my passion and what I'm super excited about. So I welcome any men who are interested in learning more.
I'll stand it. All right, listen, John, thank you so much, man. And hey, if there's ever a time that you've got something you want to talk about, you want to come back on the show, please, 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 you are more than welcome. I can't stress to people enough how much I am personally enjoying this, because it has helped my own personal growth in such a way that, I just cannot begin to really explain it, you know. And again, like I said, I I'm feeling much better about so many things. And again, it's been 9 months, you know, and hey, I don't expect it to be completely fixed. I'm 52. I've been doing the same thing for a long time. So, but I know that it's a work in progress. So, but again, through conversations like this, I try to improve myself. Just as a father, as a man, as a husband, as a human being in general. So I thank you, for the work that you're doing. And while other men may not, be eager, you know, to embrace what you're saying or thank you for it, I'm going to do my part and try to be a good example and at least tell you, hey, John, thank you very much. This will be some more stuff that impacts me in a way that you may never see, but I'm going to tell you that now that it will.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Thank you for
Absolutely.
inviting me and having me on the show. Really enjoyed this conversation and would
Yeah,
love to
me
come
as
back
well.
anytime you'll have me.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me and Mr. John Little. Hey, please follow the website, go to the website. If you've got some struggles, some things that you need answers to, this is a good spot. This is a good starting point. So that is it for me and Father Talks. Take care. You guys have a good rest of your day. Thanks. John, thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Mike.